Okay, welcome to Stereo on the Radio. I'm your co-host, James Knapp.
And I'm Anthony Steinmeier.
And our guest for this episode, our good friend Matt Sweeney.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Tony, do you want to introduce? You kind of came up with the topic for this episode.
Sure. Today, the topic is the radio, mainstream radio, as a source of discovering new music, or experiencing music that classic rock in particular, using that to discover hidden gems or deep cuts, or just a new band that you've never really had the interest in pursuing as a new favorite, I guess. I guess the idea came from the fact that I was having a conversation with a friend, and he told me that he's a huge AC/DC fan, and I was just like, what? I've never met anybody that was like super into AC/DC. This guy had like box sets and random like import CDs and stuff like that. And I was just like, they only have like 5 songs. And he was like, they've been around for like 40 years. And
I can't blame him.
No,
They're one of a kind.
But that's everything that you hear from them on the radio is basically the same song.
Yeah.
So I guess my question then would be like, if they have that much music out there, why do we only hear 5 songs? And it's the same thing with Led Zeppelin, and it's the same thing with a lot of the bands that are mainly on classic rock. I guess that would be the starting point for this. We can get into like newer music a little bit later, but right now, for me, it's just the fact that there are a lot of bands that have been around a long time that deserve a lot more credit, and I don't feel like they're getting that. Do you think that there's any other bands like that?
I mean, you brought it up that I guess we'll use classic rock as kind of a jumping off point. It definitely leans itself to classic rock radio more than almost anything else. Like, there's obviously, the top 40 where there's going to be one song by some guy and then you're never going to hear from him again.
Mm-hmm.
But it is weird that, like, I don't know if I'm bringing anything, like, CCR is one that would come to mind where everyone knows, Bad Moon Rising or, what is it? Fortunate Son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might have been Fogerty solo, but anyway.
Yeah.
Who'll Stop the Rain? Have you ever seen the rain? Heard It Through the Grapevine cover.
Traveling Band.
Yeah.
Which to me, and I'm sorry, I have to make this point because I was thinking about it before. That song, Traveling Band, that's a ripoff of Long Tall Sally by Little Richard. You listen to those songs back to back. CCR just changed the words and made it white.
Pretty much. That's a lot of...
That's what a lot of classic rockers did.
Well, I think that's like half of Led Zeppelin's catalog.
Yeah.
They just steal blues.
They added drums. That's
Only the first half. Only the first half. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, they added drums and they changed the lyrics to something about hobbits. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that, and this is where classic rock radio kind of pigeonholes itself because it's drawing from a very, what would on the surface seem like a sort of shallow pool where it's anything before this date and that's it. But really, I mean, it doesn't have to. Like,
what is the range on classic rock?
I would cut it at like
80.
Say 80, maybe even like late 70s, because I don't hear, I don't hear 70s punk on classic rock.
Well, how much punk is actually on the radio, though, in general?
I think that I feel like classic rock as a radio format kind of originated in the late 70s, early 80s. And so when that was a new thing, they were probably starting in the early to mid 60s with the first few Stones albums, for example.
Doors and Hendrix and
yeah, like basically with the British invasion, I guess,
sure.
is the furthest back that the classic rock format went. And I mean, I don't think any of us really have firsthand experience with, in the early 80s, how recently did they cover music. Maybe it only went up to the early 70s, 10 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they were playing all of that rock style right up to the current day. But, when I first got into classic rock as a teenager, I listened to the local classic rock station all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it pretty much topped out at the early 80s, I would think. But today,
Yeah.
you hear songs from the 2000s on classic rock stations.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's generous, but
Yeah.
definitely all through the 90s.
Yeah.
So the definition of classic rock has evolved because of what the radio's done.
When does something stop? I mean, now we've got classic rock. It's shifting, and you can it's a good point because you can hear like Nirvana and like early Green Day on like classic rock, which is
Oh, yeah.
weird as fuck for me.
Yeah.
But does that shift? Is there like an end date for that? Does it keep moving where like the Beatles are no longer classic rock? It like starts
Antique rock.
Yeah, it's,
Like cars, like classic car and then an antique car.
yeah, grandpa rock.
I think that's true. I think that range, I think both ends of the range kind of slide forward with the progression of time. A lot of the earliest classic rock that was played when the format was new has transitioned into whatever oldies formats are left out there.
Yeah.
And the oldies station, 15, 20 years ago only played 50s doo-wop and maybe up through the British invasion. Now there's, late 70s like kind of adult pop stuff on what's called the oldie station.
Right. But does listening to any of that stuff like make you want to delve into any of that other, like you're sitting there and you're just like, oh, I like this song by so and so. What else do they have?
Well, back in the day, it was a great place to start, and it was probably kind of the only place to start for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Before the internet,
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also a way of breaking records. Like when there were actual radio stations that, you would show up and with a record and you would have to try and like trick or bribe the DJ who was the tastemaker at the time. You would have to like get on their good side and get them to play a record.
Yeah.
And that'll make or break your career. Now you have kids that are just sitting around in their bedroom making music, putting it on SoundCloud or wherever.
People are finding it.
And they're selling millions of records. You look at in hip hop especially, you have a guy by the name of A Boogie with the Hoodie. He made an album. He put it out on SoundCloud, and he went platinum, and didn't even have a record deal. And that's I think the climate of the culture right now is people doing it on their own, the DIY, not as punk or raw as it were.
Yeah, well, I mean, even just for the sake of accessibility, because if you really think about I think like early DIY was very much out of necessity, where it's like it was the only way for and not even to bring it to punk, but even just early musicians in general. You brought up hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of talk about that there's a show on Netflix called The Get Down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it was a huge fucking hassle to write and record a song, but then even just to get it out there.
Sure.
The DIY aspect now, it feels even so much fucking easier, where all you need is a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
And you can put your own shit. You don't have to go through the fucking hassle of finding a producer or a record contract or any of that shit. You can just do it.
How much do you think was how should I phrase this? How much of it do you think is of that aspect of DIY is sort of the record company's fault for basically being loan sharks to bands
Yeah.
You know, and taking the majority of any proceeds and saying, okay, well, you know, now you have to pay for this studio time, and now you have to pay for your tour bus, and all this stuff comes out of the artist's pocket.
Yeah.
When it's like, why do I need you?
That's a good point, and I would say I think it varies from label to label, where I know that there are like a lot of, especially like smaller independent labels that are very supportive of their artist, and like their main focus is like, obviously they want to sell records and keep the lights on, but they also are invested in, like, either they are musicians themselves or have some connection to it that they truly do want to support their artist. But then there's like, I mean, fucking look at like early Motown, where it was basically an enormous Ponzi scheme.
Sure.
Just robbing these fucking dumb like 19-year-old kids of all their shit.
Well, that was even with shit. There was one of the oh god, now I'm just stammering. There was one of the original.
It's fine. It's what we do on this show.
One of the original hip hop songs was produced, and they didn't even get actual like MCs for the record. They got people like from their studio. They just said, okay, write some raps, we're gonna make this song. And then they signed everybody as co-writers, and you know, their nieces and everybody as like co-writers and sound engineers, and basically the people that were out actually performing the song that was so popular
had very little to do with
had very
recording
little, right. And then so what happened is they basically pulled the rug out from the guys that should have, you know, they had millions of records sold and they're getting like hundreds of dollars, and they realized that they had gotten screwed by the label. And is Rapper's Delight, I don't know, so one of the early ones, but it was like, I think it's kind of set the stage for the foundation for how record contracts were written going forward. And I think when you start off with a bad taste in your mouth, like, it's really hard to get away from that as an artist. And also on the record label side, once you realize that you can kind of screw these people that very limited education when it comes to business and reading contracts, and you know, how many of those people can afford lawyers to like read through it and actually be like, yeah, this is a bad deal. Yeah,
and well, we mentioned it sort of at the top of the show, where, you know, there's top 40 artists that they have like one song and then you never hear from them again, and not, I mean, it's by design. It's because that some producer wrote that song, a bunch of in-house musicians performed and recorded it, and then they just found some schmuck that they could slap their face over top of it.
Absolutely.
And it's just like, hey, you're pretty for now.
Right.
And, you know, along those lines, it sounds like even if that artist had the potential to do more stuff that sold as well, maybe it's kind of part of the design of the label industry and the radio industry to dispose of them anyway, because they know there's another one in line that they could groom to be just as good, and that way one artist doesn't amass too much leverage, essentially.
Right.
You know, they push them along before they're able to say, well, hey, everyone loves me now and I've got more stuff that I'd like. You know, they just they know that it's a revolving door because of the demand for marketing services.
Sure. And I know like a lot of, when you have a new artist, they always get a lot of promotion and a lot of push because they want to sell that first record. And once that first they'll tour on that first record, depending on the success. They can tour on that record for a year or two, and they're still trying to record a second album, or the record company wants a second album. But now, since they've been touring on that same album for so long, the record companies made their money fold, X amount of fold. I don't know the numbers, but they've definitely recouped their expenses, and now they got that artist in their pocket.
Yeah.
So then what they want is, another record, but they don't push the promotion the way that they did for that second record. You'll have a lot of people, you'll hear the sophomore slump.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a myth in the music culture, because I don't feel like it's anybody's, like an artist, I don't feel it's their fault if they don't get the promotion. They're doing what they have to do, but I don't feel like they're getting the same push that they did when they were new, because everybody wants something new.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody that's putting out, first name off the top of my head, Vanessa Carlton. She had that huge hit, and everybody went nuts for her. And even Michelle Branch, as another one. Two very talented women who made pretty good music. Not my thing, but there's a talent in there, and I think there was a market for it. And next thing you know, where are they? And I definitely feel like it happens unfairly more to women in the industry. It is a male-driven industry. Like, the men just have to, sound good.
Yeah.
Women, they have to have the whole package. They have to have the image. They have to have, several different things going on simultaneously. But I guess I digress. That's a whole other discussion.
I'm thinking about it now. This might explain a little bit of like the dichotomy of, I guess, modern radio, where we had talked about classic rock, where it's the same 5 songs by AC/DC are played constantly, and I think that's by design, because I don't think people go to classic rock radio to discover.
Sure.
They go there because it's familiar and comfortable, and they can listen to Shook Me All Night Long and remember half the words, and that's fine.
It's an easy, free way just to have background music, something that you're familiar with, that you don't pay a whole lot of attention to.
But even like what you were saying, Sweeney, was like in high school, that and this before the digital age. I mean, we're all mid-30s ish, right? So in high school, I went to the local rock radio station. Like that's what I listened to, that, and it was Godsmack, and I think what's his name, Kid Rock had just come out. Like, those were the big things on the radio, and of course, you listen to that and you think you're like this heavy metal guy, and all of a sudden you kind of like evolve more musically. And I think radio is like a stepping stone into a larger pool.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a certain time, radio, I mean, speaking personally anyway, it was the sole route to discovery. Outside of paging through my parents' record collection or something,
or a friend with
and
a random
just,
tape,
the limited word of mouth.
Because
all you could do was see people in person or talk on the phone, or maybe you had Prodigy and you could check out a chat room or a bulletin board,
AIM.
Right. But there was a lot fewer opportunities for communication with strangers, and to expand your horizons, and so radio for a long time, up until we were well into late adolescence or early adulthood, was the biggest way that any of us probably discovered all of our favorite stuff.
Sure, and you look at somebody, Michael Jackson, right? World famous, and that was before the internet, before anything other than radio and record sales and live shows, and you think some of these current artists, like, they're crazy famous and all this stuff, but I mean, outside of the people that specifically are the demographic that is like pinpointed for that type of music, how many people do you think actually know that artist and love that artist? I remember I went to Germany shortly after Michael Jackson had passed away, and we were walking in Nuremberg, and there's like probably 10 or 15 kids just hanging out on a stoop, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, the fuck is this about? What are they doing? Like, they're just hanging out. And I'm walking by. They're just hanging out, talking, and listening to Michael Jackson. And I was just like, holy shit. Like, it finally dawned on me, like, this guy was worldly known.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and that was before any of before the internet. I'm sure the internet helped him, but he didn't need it. That's how I think that's a reflection of how talented he is and was.
Well, and it's also about would primacy be the word, of the American music market. I mean, every country has. I mean, let's say every first world country at least. I don't know. I haven't been around the world a whole lot, but every country has their own indigenous pop, stable, I guess. But every country looks up to ours, I think, as the source of musical trends and taste, right?
I would agree with that.
But there's a certain, I mean, that level of fame and that, like, being, I mean, think about what you would consider to be, the most popular band in whatever genre wheelhouse that you usually go to, where if it's like, say, like a punk band who's like, they're really big, like they sell out like arenas, they sell millions of records, but it's fully feasible that you could, like, if you were just walking down the street and said, hey, do you know about these guys? They'd just be like, no. You could walk up to anyone in the world and say, do you know who Michael Jackson is? And they'll say yes.
Yeah.
Like that's insane that you are known universally.
Sure. And universally, I would think if there's aliens, I think they would definitely know about Michael Jackson.
Oh, they love Thriller.
That was the one monster, or one creature he wasn't in that video, was an alien.
That's all he...
Werewolf, zombie, alien. I think it just makes sense. That's the natural progression.
You've got to hit the trifecta.
Yeah. I think it's a necessity in music now to have that. You have to be on social media, all platforms.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely have to have something like SoundCloud, or at least be on Spotify. Which also, I think SoundCloud is another one that it's on the internet, but I still feel like it's a source of discovering music. But at the same time, I also feel like SoundCloud's a dying platform.
Yeah, well, and this is kind of the other side of the coin here, where, I mean, classic rock radio is always going to be around. It's going to be, well, we kind of established that the time frame shifts as time progresses, but it's going to be the same. Even if it's like Nirvana is getting played now, it's the same 5 Nirvana songs that everyone knows.
Right.
But then when you listen to like top 40 or like pop radio, that's where the production, the record company cycle comes back in.
Sure.
Because to keep getting listeners, you've got to constantly be on top and get the new thing in, and who's the new name, and what's the next hit. And so I think that's where that comes in a little bit more. I lost my train of thought now.
Well done.
Yeah.
Train did not keep a rolling.
Nope.
You're making a really good point, though. But I think
so, just pick up the ball, keep running. I fumbled it.
I think what happens, and I think I said it before, is like I think there's a rush to just sign new artists all the time, because the record labels just want their hands on as many artists as possible to line their pockets. And the ones that they're signing, I don't feel, in my opinion, I don't think 100% of the artists signed are deserving of a contract. They either need more time to develop, or maybe I'm just not their demographic, but some of those people I don't think should have contracts.
Well, artists for labels are products.
Absolutely.
And, just like any company that sells goods, a lot of their money comes from product innovation. You know, there's a certain percentage of their assortment that always needs to kind of turn over because they need a story to tell, a different new story to always tell to keep drawing people in and spending money on it.
And that's kind of why I stopped.
And a lot of new products fail.
Right. And I think that's why I got sucked into American Idol for like the first like 3 seasons, I think. It was just one of those things where my roommates and I would just watch it just to kind of make fun of it, and it became like everybody picked their favorite and then you just kind of shit talk. It almost became sport. But I think...
Well, I mean, it was reality TV, just like anything else, whether it was performance or just lifestyle-oriented or whatever.
I just remember my roommate being semi-obsessed with Bo Bice. We'd be...
Oh, yeah, I think I liked him, yeah.
It'd be like time for everybody's winding down, and he'd go lay in his bedroom, and he'd have the door open, and you know, the lights are off, it'd be real quiet, and all of a sudden from the other room you would just hear, "Vote for Bo Bice!" And it was just a good time. But I think my problem with the whole thing was everybody had the same damn sob story. Everybody's been singing since they were a kid. They had some tragedy happen. Now they're here to like make mama proud, or you know, something like that. And it's just like, we get it. Who doesn't sing as a baby? Babies do those things, right? And who doesn't have tragedy in their life? I get it. Some of it is definitely worse than others. But okay, how many, you know, homeless amputee orphans are gonna make it, and like
exactly 12.
Exactly 12.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not even about the quality of the music in a setting like
You're
that.
selling the story.
They want the audience to be able to root for somebody. And
everybody wants to root for the underdog.
If you push someone that was a straight A student and went to college for performance, and it's like, well, all right, get this guy out of here.
That's the American way, though, too. America will always say we're number one, but will always believe it's the underdog somehow. You can't have it both ways, America. Make up your mind. Which are you, number one or the underdog? I would say you're the underdog because you're not number one in a lot of things other than school shootings.
Maybe we're the number dog. Nobody ever questioned that.
The number dog?
The number dog. Number one dog.
Holy shit. The number dog. Now, hang on a minute. I need a minute on that.
Yeah, well, that's wrapping it back around. That's the whole, you know, the emerging artist always has to come from sort of an underground perspective or a subgenre. So the way that, like, there was a really good movie called 24-Hour Party People. Have you seen that? So, and the way that they describe popular music is that it's like a double helix, where anytime one genre is on the wane, another one is on the rise. So when something like, for instance, like hair metal in the 80s, that was the helix going back down into the 90s, and then Nirvana was this, you know, this punk resurgence that was just... It was always there, that, you know, that community, that music was always being made, but that was just like, well, we're sick of this, now this is the new thing.
Well, and that was the thing, is like hair metal, they just cranked out so many bands, and every album was so overproduced that once a genre of music gets to a certain point, it just becomes white noise. Everybody just sounds the same.
Yeah.
And it's typical in any genre that becomes overly popular, because everybody wants to have that sound. Everybody, especially the record companies, want people to, hey, we have this group and they made us $1 million. You know what we need? $5 more million. So we need 5 more bands just like that one.
But then that cycle just repeats. How many alt-rock bands in the 90s had like one really popular song on radio and then you never saw them again?
Black Hole Sun.
Black Hole...
And actually, I think that song actually became more popular because of Beavis and Butthead.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, for sure.
I don't think a lot of people would have been exposed to that song had it not been for Beavis and Butthead.
Probably not.
So I have a question for you guys. So do either one of you have a current favorite band that you were introduced to via mainstream radio?
Oh.
How like a new band or
well,
like
someone that's among your 10 or 15 favorite bands, say, who your first exposure to them and your first motivation to seek out more of their catalog was mainstream FM, the popular rock station or whatever.
Good question.
Or has everything on mainstream radio been of little interest to you, and you've always, ever since you started finding your own music, got them through other channels?
Well, I will say that growing up, I was like right on the cusp of like, I don't know what you would call like, I don't know, like internet era. Like I had internet growing up, but it was late. It was shifted a little bit back. So like I remember like we had like a dial-up modem until I was like 16 years old. But so I did still have. I had like capability to like get it from different sources, but I still had to listen to like radio to get to become aware of things early on. In any case,
sure.
And there was the station that I always listened to in Baltimore was 99.1 HFS, and it was alternative radio, which was just anything vaguely rockish. So they would play like Eminem on that as well.
So it's kind of like a college radio.
Sort of, but it was, big bands like, Green Day and Soundgarden and who am I? What else was big? SR-71. Have we talked about them yet?
I
don't think I've ever talked about them.
I don't know if that came up in the one hit. I don't think they came up yet.
I want to talk about them on the One Hit Wonder episode.
But I think we need to revisit that because I was telling you I've thought of a few other ideas regarding the One Hit Wonder. But anyway.
So I'm going to keep thinking about this because that's a very interesting question. But like off the top of my head, I can't think of a band that I originally heard about on the radio that became one of my favorites, but I think a lot of the bands I listened to ended up leading me into like we'll listen to Green Day, and that's when you get into punk, and then you find here's a like old compilation that they were on, and
go into Hot Topic for a Green Day T-shirt and find one of those like Fat Records compilation discs.
Yeah, and then here's
for $5.
And then here's Rancid and NoFX are on that same thing. You start getting
Mustard
into them,
Plug.
and you find Fat Records and like there's Against Me and like None More Black and like all this stuff.
Oh yeah, None More Black. I think for me it was growing up. And I think it comes from more of a sense of nostalgia for me. Like, I used to spend summers over at my cousin's house, and we would go to the county pool, like the public pool, and they just played the radio station over the loudspeaker. And it was the top 40 radio station, Wink 104.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I have vivid, very fond memories of summers listening to like one of my favorite bands still, Genesis, Phil Collins. I love that stuff. I will still play the records. I have I think 3 or 4 Phil Collins records and a couple of Genesis records. And to me, like, there's so much talent in that band, and when Phil Collins went out on his own before he started doing like just movie scores like Lion King, but he killed it on Lion King. But I think that is definitely one band that I'd heard on the radio, and I didn't initially listened to them for a while because I started exploring other music, but I definitely came back to Genesis, like the whole Invisible Touch album, and then when Phil Collins did Face Value, I just fell in love with that sound, and I super talented musician. I would, if he went on tour right now, I would go see him. Also, I would say Prince, but they never play enough Prince on the radio. Nobody ever plays enough Prince.
No, it's hard to figure out what the right radio station would be to kind of give him a home at.
Right.
He doesn't fit neatly into a certain genre, at least as far as how the radio industry is organized, right?
Not at all.
So do you have any bands that you got into specifically through radio?
Well, after I came up with that question, I did have a hard time thinking of what my answer would be, because let's say with classic rock, primarily my route to discovery was my parents' record collection, let's say.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, okay, what about like in the 90s when I was a teenager and my friends and I were getting into the alternative stuff, and I thought, okay, Green Day is probably a good example of something that I was first exposed to out in the world and not at home through family influence. But then again, I probably got more familiar with Dookie and those singles on MTV, not the radio so much.
Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about that.
And so I think I'll have to go with Wilco. And there was a period of time where I did a lot of listening to XPN, the great radio station out of the University of Pennsylvania, and Wilco, probably still to this day, are darlings of that station.
Oh, absolutely.
But I now like Wilco a lot, and I could clearly recall my first experience with them being probably right around when Sky Blue Sky came out, hearing a lot of those songs on XPN.
Okay.
But yeah, I think maybe what we've kind of heard here is that it's not a very useful way to discover music for any of us, right?
Not particularly.
No. Even with new music, you're still getting a very small section of music that's not very diverse. Everybody sounds very similar, and they play the same, Drake, as an example. Super popular. I understand why he's popular. I do like some of his music, but how many Drake songs can you listen to before they're all the same? There's like 3 emotions to Drake. He's either like dance party, he's hardcore rapper, or he's loving, love song, and it's this weird thing where I think he's the new, since we've been calling it AC/DC.
Yeah.
You get those 3, 4, 5 songs, and Controlla. I can't even think of how many other ones. That's the first one that comes to mind is Controlla. But they play the hell out of these songs to where they become meaningless. It's like repeating a word until it loses the sense of its own definition.
Well, and that is, that seems to be radio in a nutshell, or at least, whatever version of it we have come up with here, where it's either the pop radio, what's the next big thing, and constantly just a cycle of like new artists that, sure, some of them may be like genuinely talented and they are going to stick, but then when that happens, they shift to the other side of radio, where it's you're a staple, and I'll bring Green Day back into it because they become a very good cultural bookmark for us to use.
I think everybody had like a quote, air quote, radio air quote, period of their life where you go through the air quote the Green Day period.
Everyone had a punk phase. Who was it recently who's...
But I mean, how many punk bands made it to Broadway?
Oh, yeah.
And at that point, you know, when
Just them, maybe Billy Idol.
probably.
Yeah.
But I feel like obviously once you sell a certain amount of records, you're no longer punk.
Well, that's probably a controversial topic, right?
I mean, we've just like branched into a whole other conversation
Right.
with that.
Right.
We have to get the guys from Small Pollen back on to talk about that one.
Oh boy. I'm going to be in trouble when they come back on.
Yeah.
But I the only reason I say that is because like punk music is supposed to be like this small subgenre of just like a very tight-knit family that obviously it's a dysfunctional family to say the least. But they don't like outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very rigid guidelines as to how to be a punk and what a punk is. But that's SLC Punk, one of the best movies about punks.
Love it.
Yeah.
And they talk about, what was that guy's name? He wore the polo and khakis, and he was like, this is the most punk guy ever because he doesn't even fit into being a punk.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care.
Jason Segel's character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Muppets himself. But I think that's the idea, is the fact that you should be able to define your own character and your taste and your sound, and still be able to claim whatever subset that you feel you actually fit into.
Yeah.
But everybody, you know, we talked about it before, the punk uniform.
Yeah. And
I think that there's definitely every genre of music has a uniform. You have to look the way the music you listen to looks.
And I don't think that is necessarily unique to punk.
No,
I mean,
hip hop,
fucking
metal,
metalheads, country is a big one.
Country is a very big one.
Where, oh god, I don't know a ton of country, but he's pretty popular, so I'll throw him under the bus. Blake Shelton.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Is very good.
I saw your eyes cross as you said that too.
Sweeney was nice enough to bring us a half jar of Boilo from good old Skullkill, and Dave just had his first sip and agreed that it's very good. It tastes very Christmassy.
Mm-hmm. I can drink a whole jar of that.
Easily.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous.
It would probably make me blow.
That's probably why there was only half a jar. But it's fantastic. It reminds me of Christmas.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get in on that. But yeah, it's something like he's become very popular, and he's on that one
The Voice.
show. Yeah, but that's like you could also like find like old like videos or like concert footage of him. He's just a fucking hick.
Oh yeah.
Like he's not this whatever fucking like perfect like beard that is perfectly scraggled enough and tailored flannel shirts. It's a costume.
Right.
The same way that fucking like.
Well, now he's spending hundreds of dollars to look redneck instead of just being redneck.
Yeah. The same way that like there were tons of like, especially after punk quote broke in like the late 70s. Where now there's, that's the punk fashion where it's like you've got, safety pins and fucking studs on everything.
Yeah.
And mohawk. But you mean, look at early Black Flag. They're wearing just like fucking like polos and khakis, like shit they got from Salvation Army.
Right.
Like they were a punk band. They're just like, we can't afford like $30 worth of studs to put on everything.
Right. Well, there's a store in Lancaster, Angry Young and Poor. And they sell like all these awesome old like concert T-shirts from like old punk bands and stuff like that. I got Lars Fredriksson. And the Bastards T-shirt there. Yeah, and the store's called Angry Young and Poor.
But how much was the shirt?
The shirt was like $30-something,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, now I'm angry, I am young, and now I'm poor because I don't have the money for this. But you're charging the shit out of it, and to me it didn't make sense. It seems ass backwards.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry for putting anybody on blast on Angry Young and Poor.
Nah, fuck them.
But I think today it's cyclical, and it is still the same, where it's just new people ramming the same shit down our throats. And I don't think it's good for anybody. I don't think that it's moving the culture and people with it's not moving anything anywhere. It's becoming stagnant. Radio is stagnant. It is the newspaper of the digital age. It's like it's a dying platform because most people don't want to listen to the, you have like probably kids and like preteens that listen to the radio because that's what their parents allow them to. It's like a safe zone.
Yeah.
There's no swearing, there's not, I mean, the messages are very, I think, overly sexual in most of those songs that are on the radio, but I feel like it's been that way for a long time. But at least in the older generations, in the 60s and stuff like that, you have songs like Under the Boardwalk, which is by the Drifters, which is this beautiful song. They're super talented, they're singing, but it's about having sex under the boardwalk. It's banging while people are walking above.
As you do.
Yeah, and reminiscing about the smell of French fries and hot dogs while you're banging this chick. You're reminiscing about the summers when you lost your cherry, but now it's like,
oh, it's real salty down here.
but now there's no illusion. There's no romantic aspect to it. There's no poetry to it. It's just, I'm bang this chick, we're getting it on, da 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 da, and that's the song. And it's, what the hell is that? It's you're taking the Vaseline off the camera. Yeah, you don't have the pretty window dressing. So I think that's the other thing, is a lot of people just want to seem like they're saying something when they're really not.
Yeah, I think like probably in the previous generations, radio was in the business of promoting art and promoting taste and leading people in their tastes. But now, I guess what we're saying is it's just more of a reactive. Radio is a reflection of what the culture has already become through other means, and it's just kind of a validation of what was already forged elsewhere, right?
Sure, it's definitely reactionary, and I would say radio in and of itself is usually behind at least 6 months, because they'll put out new music, but that song's probably been out for 6-8 months, and it got more traction somewhere else, and now they're like, oh, this is the new hot song from XYZ, whoever.
Yeah. Hate that band.
Right. Bastards.
Well, yeah, and they don't bother playing it now until it's already famous.
Right.
They're not taking a chance on
No.
trying to make something famous.
No, the last thing radio wants to do is take a chance on
risk
anything.
These days, isn't there, in pop radio?
Absolutely.
And I mean, the same thing with, like, we talked about it earlier, record labels. They don't want to take a chance on anything. They want to know that this guy's going to sell.
No.
And those are directly linked, where it's like, I don't even, like, Geffen Records is going to just straight up just like, this is who is coming out next month.
Right.
So you guys play this stuff.
Right. Well, look at early Interscope.
Yeah.
Early Interscope, they were just like, who can we sign? Marilyn Manson, Lady Gaga, Eminem. They had all these people that were just like out of nowhere,
Oh, that is a full flavored beverage.
Boilo steals the show.
Woo! Boilo's gonna be its own separate episode. It's just gonna be us drinking Boilo and
we have a new recurring thing for the show.
Ugh.
Tasting notes, pairing suggestions.
Yeah. I could see this with goes well with a fist fight with a traffic cop.
And fried pork chops.
And fried pork, yes. Lemon zested.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think at a certain point people outgrow radio. Whether it be the music is no longer for them, or they just kind of. I would hope that people grow musically, like do a little bit of legwork and say, oh, I like this band and I'm going to see what else they have. Or they at least say, okay, these guys sound like this other band that came before them. So let me dig into their influences, find out what you like and don't like, and then say, okay, what are their influences? And you just kind of backtrack the whole way. And that way you can get into other music. Like one of the best things to do, I think, is when you read an article or see an interview by an artist that you like, and they start naming their influences. If you like that artist, start listening to their influences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me, that was like one of the biggest ways of discovering music from before my time. And I used to have this book. It was called Last Night a DJ Saved My Life.
Yeah.
And it was about 600 pages, and it just covered the history of the DJ from like the 40s up until I would say the mid 90s into the rave scene. And what they would do is they would name like, you know, these DJs in different time periods that had big influences.
Yeah.
In the local scene, and they did New York, and it was like the 70s when like Studio 54 was big, and when people would have these rent parties, and they would name all these songs. So what I would do is I would jot them down, and then I would go on LimeWire and like infect my friend's computer with like 600 computer STDs and make these playlists, and then have this disc and label it, oh yeah, New York 70s. And then like that's what I would listen to for like a couple months. And then from that I'd be like, oh well, okay, Gloria Gaynor, that's awesome. Okay, who else? And then I would start finding all these other just like random songs and random artists that I would just like fall in love with. And then it was like, okay, what else? And I was just like devouring all kinds of music.
Yeah.
And I think people need to do stuff like that, and I hope people do stuff like that just to realize that before you, there was so much more music that, you know, I'm still discovering stuff from the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
That it's so good that it's like, where's this been all my life?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that in a perfect world for the industry, that would be like the intermediate step along your path to purchasing the recordings and the concert tickets. And I don't think that circuit is being closed anymore, at least not where the radio is a part of it anyway.
Right, and I think
that radio is no longer the first step on that path.
And I think that's where the record labels need to figure out, like, obviously people were downloading music, right? Legally or illegally, however they see fit.
Semi-legally.
Right. I think if they could find a way... Well, if they could find a way that... And I think iTunes, more or less, is what is needed. Maybe not specifically iTunes, but something in that vein where it's like you can buy individual songs for $1, or you can buy the whole album for a couple bucks. Right, I think that's a good method. But I used to belong to this online club, and what it was is you paid a monthly fee, you got X amount of credits, and what you did is you could use those credits to purchase music. And, individual songs were like 2 credits, and then you'd have like a 10-track album, and instead of it being 20 credits, it'd be like 15. So you got a bit of a discount, and then at like Christmas, they gave you an extra 25 credits, as a Christmas gift, air quotes again.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, that worked out until there were bands, the one was Toro y Moi, and just this fantastic band. If you haven't heard of them, you should definitely look into them. Super cool. And I went to go buy one of their albums, and it told me that the album wasn't available in my country. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm paying for this. You have it on your site. Why can't I purchase this?
Yeah.
And that's all that back-end legal BS that either you're never going to get an explanation as to why you can or can't purchase an album.
Mm-hmm.
But so I had to go find it illegally. Don't tell the cops, anybody.
The internet cops.
Yeah, damn you.
Bill Gates.
Yeah. It's Bill Gates and Zuckerberg just like running around like Keystone Cops in the tubes of the interwebs. But I think people are willing to discover new music and want the experience of purchasing music and falling in love with a band and going to see a band live. And I think that's where most bands kind of gain their popularity, is the live shows. Because there's a lot of bands that don't transfer well from live show to a recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of radio material was never designed in the first place to be played live, probably, right?
Right. Well, and vice versa. There's a lot of live bands that you buy their album and you're just like, what is this? And then somebody's like, oh, hey, do you want to go see whoever? And you're like, yeah, okay, I guess so. I heard that one song.
Yeah.
And you go see them live and you're like, holy shit, these guys are good.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that like when Shaggy played at Tom Sawyer's?
Oh.
Everyone is there just like, what we want you to play, man.
Wasn't me.
Yeah.
Come on.
He's got all this like new stuff. He's just like, yeah, I've been writing, like, just play it.
Right. He's like, oh, I just wrote this, and it could be like Shakespeare, and they're like,
Yeah.
nope, come on, wasn't me.
You're Shaggy, man.
And actually, while you're at it, do Who Let the Dogs Out? That wasn't even me. I don't care.
Yeah.
You're here, do it.
Just play your hit now, right up front. We promise we'll stay if you play it again at the end.
Right. From what I had a friend that actually went and saw him there.
Yeah.
And they said, like, part of his rider is he gets, like, X amount of bottles of tequila or whatever, and he's just, like, passing it out to the crowd. He's like, whatever. He's, like, pouring shots on people. And from what I hear, he's, like, a really cool guy.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna sit here and validate Shaggy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go out and buy the Shaggy record.
Come on! Why not?
Oh.
You want to.
I mean, I want to listen to It Wasn't Me. Yeah.
You should just make a mix CD where every track is just It Wasn't Me.
Oh, that's perfect.
My friend's sister did that with Barbie Girl. She made a mixtape, she bought the single, the single CD, and then copied it to a tape on a loop. Both sides of a 90-minute tape was Barbie Girl. She played it all summer.
I mean, it saves some mechanical stress on the player, I guess.
I mean, that's the quickest route to madness.
She was an attractive girl up until that. That was the summer she was no longer hot.
Aqua broke her.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for me.
Do you want to take a quick break and get into the second half here?
Okay.
All
Works for me.
All right. We'll be right back.
Peace out.
Okay, and we're back.
We're back.
This is the second half of the show where we have each chosen a distinct song that is somehow related to our topic of radio as a source of discovery for music.
Or not discovery.
That's true. That seems to have. I think during the break we had talked about this. There haven't been a ton of like jokes in this episode just because we have spent so much of the first half just like beating the shit out of the music industry.
Yeah, well, I think every episode there is a pinata that we kind of just hammer to death.
This show has a big problem with authority.
Yeah, fuck them.
Fuck.
We're just gonna say that a bunch because we can.
Yeah. No one censors this goddamn show.
Boobies.
Well, now you're just being crass.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
anyway, after boobies, it's us choosing these songs. James is gonna go first. James, give us a little idea of the songs.
So I had everything that we talked about in the first half of this show. I had a few songs that I was kind of bouncing around in my head as far as like how it relates back to radio. And for the life of me, I mean, there was not a ton of stuff on the radio growing up that I like still listen to. Like outside of, we talked about all of the, classic rock, and there's the comfortable songs that you're used to, but there wasn't anything. So what I kind of ended up going with was, well, it's sort of twofold. The band, the song by the band is Punk Rock Radio by Nicotine, which it's a Japanese band. And I found out about them in that way that we kind of discussed, where one thing leads to another. So where you start out on
that's a completely different song.
Yeah, but for the purposes of this,
right.
You listen to like a Rancid song on the radio, and then you find like a compilation that they were on, and that leads you to
was there a Rancid song on the radio?
Oh yeah,
Ruby Soho.
I mean, I was thinking of Fall Back Down. That was a big one when I was coming around.
I probably have heard it and didn't realize it was a Rancid song.
It's not a good song.
So, yeah, just tell us how you feel.
Yeah, but that was in that same vein of just like, I never would have fucking heard. I mean...
Love this band.
There's that dial-up modem again over there.
That's another one to add to the soundboard.
Oh, yeah, we gotta get that. But yeah, I mean, a fucking, pop punk band from Japan in like the early 2000s, never would have heard of them if it hadn't been for, I was listening to HFS one day and heard this one song, and then that led me down this huge fucking rabbit hole to now I'm just like, what else is out there? So I'm going to tool it up and we can kind of talk over it. There's a little bit of a weird intro to it as well, but that was the other side. I thought it was very, postmodern to have a punk rock radio as the radio song to do.
There you go.
Hey, this is Mark in the Morning. We're back. We're going to go to traffic in just a minute, but now we're going to hear news from a band from Japan. They're called Nicotine. They got this new number called, what's this one called? Yep, Punk Rocker Radio.
Very, very popular.
Oh yeah, like it's nothing spectacular, but it's, I mean, it is just a pretty good straight. It reminds me of early Green Day.
You found glory.
Yeah.
You know what part of Japan?
I do not.
Good old gang vocals.
And you can kind of tell it was released in that era of just like, I don't think, like the early 2000s was big for pop punk.
Yeah. Blink-182.
Oh yeah.
So, tell me about the lyrical
They want to hear punk rock on the radio.
No, that's about it. They just they managed to stretch that concept for about 3 minutes.
I mean, whatever radio station that is, I'm sure you
Absolutely.
There's no such station like this.
I would be outside of Pandora, I'd be surprised.
That's not a radio station. That's an app.
But this was,
I like it. I think it's very fitting.
Three famous songs on the radio.
Shake you out there.
I wanna hear
No,
the punk
well,
rock
yeah, but-
radio.
no, but
Three
yeah, but-
famous songs on the radio. I wanna hear
I think
the
it is very
punk rock
fitting.
radio.
Needless to say, this is
Three famous songs on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
I wanna hear the punk rock radio. Every day, every
I
time,
always thought it was really funny because, like, even with, like, hardcore rap, like, there was always a clean version. So, like, how hardcore can you be if you're taking out the swears, like, you're giving it to the crusher,
Yeah.
to be radio friendly? Like, kind of ironic.
yeah. There was they used to intentionally do like radio edits where they would change the lyrics of, and the one is,
That's good, Boilo.
oh my, I can't fucking remember the song was "Shake Yo Ass," and they changed
Mystico.
Yeah, they changed it to "Shake It Fast" for the radio.
Oh, well, even Black Eyed Peas had that song, Let's Get It Started. On the album, that song's Let's Get Retarded.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And everybody loves that song, but they like the radio version better.
I know that the Who has some notoriety, I believe, for slipping one past the censors in the
Sure.
song "Who Are You." There's a little "Who the fuck are you" towards the end of the song, I think, or I don't know, maybe it's repeated in the refrains every time, but that was always kind of the
Nice.
little gotcha that everyone admired the Who for being so discreet about it that radio stations didn't bother to bleep it or otherwise edit it.
There's was it Louie Louie, that old song?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Kingsman, yeah.
They were under investigation by the FBI when that
Mhm.
song came out because they wanted to find, the FBI was looking for like subversive messages, but they completely miss where the drummer yells "fuck."
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
drops a drumstick, and you can hear, if you listen close, you can hear him yell "fuck."
Yeah.
And somehow, the hundreds of times that the FBI listened to it, they never caught that, and it was on the radio forever.
This is where your tax dollars go.
Yeah. So the song that I picked is George Harrison, "My Sweet Lord." The reason I picked that is because I remember growing up, I was a pretty big Beatles fan, much more now. But I never really listened to anything of their solo stuff when I was younger. But I remember when Got My Mind Set on You came out,
Oh yeah.
like mid-'80s, is like really catchy. And it was like really different from everything else that was on the radio.
Mhm.
And that's when I was really just like, who the hell is this guy? I didn't make the connection that he was in the Beatles.
Yeah, right.
So found out, and then I bought his, triple album of This Too Shall Pass.
All things
Oh,
must
yeah.
pass,
That's yeah, thank you. And this is probably one of my favorite songs on that album. I mean, there's so many great songs on that whole thing, but yeah, this is probably one of my favorites.
All right, no, I'm gonna start it now.
Okay, thanks for telling me. He was on the Dick Cavett show.
Oh fuck, that was a while ago.
Right, obviously.
Yeah.
I watched it on YouTube, and they were talking to him about when after the Beatles had broken up, and he said, you know, he was in the Beatles with two of the greatest songwriters ever, and he was only allowed like 2 songs per record.
Right.
So he said in like '67, he said he could have put out an album every year with stuff that he had written in '65.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like he's that just cranking out music nonstop. He's such a great, the silent Beatle.
Yeah.
He's just like so crazy talented, but he's
That's why,
just overshadowed by two other super talented people.
And that's why he was the first one of the four out with a solo album after their breakup, because he had amassed all of these compositions over those last few years, and he was just ready to go with them once he was no longer being pushed into the background.
Do you know who the first solo Beatle was to go platinum?
Sam McCartney.
Ringo Starr?
It was Ringo.
Oh, shit.
It was Ringo. Yup. He had some shitty like country. What was it? Act. Why can't I think of it? It's
Act Naturally.
Act Naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. That went platinum.
That actually doesn't surprise me. If we're talking about like what is radio friendly, Ringo Starr is like his face is just plastered on the front of every radio station and just like Ringo approved.
The crusty brand seal of approval. It's good enough.
It's good enough. I don't mind the taste.
One of my favorite ways that I've read Beatles were characterized was by Robert Christgau. I was never sure how to pronounce it. Do we know? Anyway,
If anybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
he said that John was a media artist, Paul was a composer, George was a guitarist, and Ringo was just a Beatle. And I think that is a really clever way to sum it all up.
Yeah.
That
The
sounds about
dynamics
right.
in that band.
He was a competent drummer, but he wasn't anything to stand out.
No, not at all.
He always said his claim. He was like, "Oh, my art is that I never play the same riff the same way."
Yeah, well, that's not true.
And I think for him, I think he just doesn't know how to.
Yeah.
So he's just like making it up. Oh, this sounds okay now. Blah, 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 blah. You know, there's your drum fill.
Yeah.
Next.
There's all I forget who the interviewer was when they asked like is Ringo the best drummer in the world? I think John is like the best drummer in the Beatles.
Yes. That's another good one.
Damn you, Ringo. How are these the two Beatles that survived?
What, Paul and Ringo?
Yeah. God damn it.
Who do you think is gonna go first?
I'm gonna go with Paul.
Me too.
Just because that's the way it's been going.
We're never gonna get rid of Ringo.
No, he just got knighted not too long ago. Finally. Like I don't get it. Like
It was a slow year.
who else are they gonna do? Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Blake Shelton.
Gary Glitter.
Oh
Is he
man.
British?
Eat well.
Yeah, there you go. Has Clapton been knighted?
I have no idea. I don't know.
He's English, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. So, what the hell? What's the holdup? Get on that, Queen!
Come on, Queen, you're not fulfilling your duties.
Goddamn letdown. Alright. And then now we have Mr. Sweeney's turn.
Yes.
You got that there, James, queued up?
I'm gonna get it tuned up. Why don't you give us a little background on it for?
Well, okay, so I have a story about this song and why I chose it for this episode. And this is, again, outside of the strictly the discovery aspect of our topic, but I think this little anecdote is a good example of how the business side of radio makes people lose a little bit of faith in the system, shall we say. So
we shall.
Every Memorial Day,
It's been said.
I think it's Memorial Day, they run the Indy 500 race car event. And
I have to take your word for that.
so every year,
Sports.
on WEZX, Northeast Pennsylvania's home of rock and roll, Rock 107,
Oh.
Shout out.
they would spend the entire Memorial Day weekend doing the Rock and Roll 500.
Ooh.
And they would count down the 500 most popular songs in their library.
Does that go by requests or album sales, or was
there was a request component, and there was also a poll in like the Weekend magazine that you could vote for your favorite songs
that's
too.
cool.
But however they derived the actual rankings, from Friday afternoon all the way through Sunday afternoon or Monday afternoon, whatever the case may have been, they would play these 500 songs in order. And so my buddies and I would always have a little get-together at my parents' house. This is, we're late teenagers, late 90s, say, and we would fire up the grill and have burgers, and we would play Rock 107's Rock and Roll 500. That was our soundtrack.
Nice.
And we did this for a few years straight. And every year, the number one song was always basically either Stairway to Heaven or Freebird. They always kind of jockeyed between, first and second place every year.
I wish Freebird would just go away.
And it was always so predictable. Once you got into the top five, nobody even went to the bathroom because everyone was dying to know which one would edge the other out this year, Stairway or Freebird.
Oh, goodness.
And one year, number 3 comes in Freebird, let's say.
Okay.
And everyone's, holy shit, it's not going to be
happening.
Freebird. Someone else is going to be in the top 2.
Call Grandma, it's finally happening.
Yeah.
And then we said, well, okay, let's see what number 2 is going to be. This is going to be a wild card here because we know Stairway is going to be number 1.
Right.
And then Stairway plays for number 2.
Oh.
And everybody loses their minds. What could possibly be going on here? We already did Another Brick in the Wall.
Yeah, sure.
We already did Hotel California. We
Another song
already
I
did,
hate.
I don't know, what are some other ones like Money for Nothing? Nah, I guess maybe that's not one of the biggest ones. You Shook Me All Night Long, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Start Me Up or what have you.
That's not even a good Rolling Stones song. I'd
No,
rather hear
is.
like Paint It Black like 1,000 times than listen to that like 3 times.
Yeah.
So, number 1 was Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith.
Ooh.
Which every year up until that point, I don't know, maybe cracked the top 20 or 25 if it was lucky.
Sure.
It's a popular song, one of Aerosmith's bigger songs. Sure. Aerosmith's a big band. It's a perfectly good song. But everybody's like wondering what the hell was up with that choice this year, out of nowhere. And eventually everyone put it together. Aerosmith is playing at Montage Mountain later that summer.
Oh, so it was the sale. The fix was in.
The fix was totally in.
Oh, boo. Boo you, radio.
Aerosmith stole the top spot just for marketing purposes, just for hype.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And
I'd never listen to the radio station again.
That is when we stopped listening to the Rock and Roll 500. No disrespect to Aerosmith or Sweet Emotion.
But that you're right. It's a clear marketing ploy. That's why any band coming to town, all of a sudden they start plugging the hell out of, oh, hey, so-and-so's coming to Hershey Park Stadium, Hershey Arena, or wherever. We're playing that.
Yeah.
That shit all the time now.
And that's fine, and that's to be expected. But the countdown is not the place for that.
This is sacred.
The countdown is sacred.
That's right.
All right, I'm gonna tune this up a while.
There was collusion.
It's payola all over again.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
money's just moving through different channels.
That's right. What is this? Is this a Lowe's commercial, or is this?
Is this?
No, it's the video. It's the beginning of the video.
Have you been a good little boy?
What?
Is this a Lowe's commercial? If you could see the video I'm seeing right now, you would be very upset if this was a Lowe's commercial.
Why is it somebody not DIYing?
It's just a naked woman fixing a faucet.
That seems like a perfect Lowe's commercial.
I know, right?
I definitely. How many people, if that were a Lowe's commercial, how many people do you think would go to Lowe's thinking that chick would be there?
Well, I need to go get some light strippers now.
You definitely gotta go look at pipes.
Lowe's. You need new socket covers.
Six.
Because fine if you want to plug Aerosmith because their concert is coming up.
I mean, that
Why
makes
this
sense.
song?
Yeah, why
Out of all Aerosmith songs.
Right.
You'd think, I don't know, Dream On is more of an epic.
Yeah.
It's more in the same league as Stairway and Freebird and Hotel California, for example.
Sure.
Sweet Emotion is, it's a little bit of a throwaway in terms of its,
I'm gonna
compositional style.
Do you know what year this was? Do you remember?
Boy, oh boy, not off the top of my head. It was on their first or second album.
Hey, you guys
Vacation.
are lucky that I have all the world's information at my fingertips.
The only thing I say, if it was not that long after Dazed and Confused came out, that's the only thing.
That movie definitely like rejuvenated Aerosmith. Because what, at the end of that movie, they're going to an they're like heading out of town for an Aerosmith.
Well, he puts the fucking headphones on and it's just Sweet Emotion. Like he starts.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I misremembered.
They are going to see Aerosmith.
Right.
That's like the idea of the movie. Like, oh, I got these tickets for Aerosmith, man. The main characters all pile into
Hey.
Waterson's car. Fucking Matt
What are you gonna do
Sweeney.
tonight?
I have to admit, the
Alright,
most that I
alright.
know about Aerosmith comes from Wayne's World 2.
Wayne's World was my introduction to Queen.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
No, if you grew up in the suburbs in the 90s, that Bohemian Rhapsody sing-along was just
What
gold.
else?
Yeah, that's the only song to hit number one in two different decades.
Good. As it should be.
Definitely. This song came out in 1975 on Columbia Records on the album Toys in the Attic, released as a single on May 19th. That's a perfect summer song. I'd say that. I can definitely imagine like 75, like grilling out, like listening to some Aerosmith, getting tuned up.
Is that all, Bill?
I'm watching the video off to the side, and this is the most 70s a band has ever been.
Did you ever watch any of the old, like, I can't think of it. The old Soul Train videos?
No.
Oh, dude. You want to talk about how 70s it can be? Yeah, watch the old Soul Train videos. Anybody that has ever been on, like, the Jackson 5 was on there,
Yeah.
and it's probably around this same time. Lapels and flared bell bottoms everywhere, afros. It was glorious.
Well, I'll do you one better than this video for 70s shtick. I think Journey's Separate Ways video maybe had the band just standing on a dock or a pier or something playing air instruments in the video.
Can we definitely watch that right now?
Oh,
Do you ever Lick It Up by Kiss?
Yeah.
When they take their makeup off as the first video they did without the makeup.
Right.
How terrible is that video? They're like walking in an alley with like their gross, like greasy faces, like muscle shirts, and they're not even buff.
what was the song title?
I think it's Separate Ways.
It's just terrible. You're like, who are these fucking South Jersey assholes? Like, lip syncing to Kiss.
Oh, it is Kiss.
Hey, that's Kiss. These guys get laid all the time.
Gene Simmons.
I want to interview a woman that has slept with Gene Simmons. Not because I want to know, like, what kind of a person sleeps with Gene Simmons? Oh, yeah, I do remember this video.
Oh, the instruments do materialize nowhere at some point, yeah.
Oh, yeah, look, the walking legs, the random legs.
The leather skirt.
I wish this was better radio.
Oh my god.
Mullet. Steve Perry.
Oh, for sure, yeah. That was an iconic video. Robert Palmer, yeah.
We're just gonna have to like post this to social media because it's the most ridiculous fucking.
Addicted to Love.
I think that is it.
And
What was the
Simply
other one?
Irresistible was
Yes,
one.
Yeah.
Irresistible.
Yeah,
is a terrific.
he had a pretty funny one where he did a cover of this song, "You Are in My System." The song was originally done by The System. He did a cover of it, and he didn't really change anything about the song. And then he did a video of it, and he literally shows up. There's like an electronic drum set in the middle of this like warehouse. He shows up, sits down, picks up the drumsticks, never hits it, and throws the sticks in the air and just walks away. And it was like, what the hell was the point of that? What are you doing, Robert Palmer? Anyway.
Oh, man.
It was barely a step up, I guess, from like those 60s like psychedelic like TV performances where the band is playing on a soundstage, but like they're not actually playing, and you're hearing the studio recording, but you're watching them supposedly play it live, and like the drummer's like not even making contact with the cymbals.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like Airheads, when they had to shoot the music video, and all of a sudden they just all dropped their instruments. They're like, we're not even playing.
And it's it was air quote anti-establishment musicians that kind of like play into that. I think it was the Smiths when they had to perform This Charming Man on a show like that. And Morrissey was just like not even he didn't have a microphone, he just had a bouquet of flowers that he was singing into.
But I mean, you got to do those things to sell records, right?
I guess so.
I believe those shows are like contractually obligated.
I mean, I'll never know.
I don't think any of us will ever know. You want to make money, right, kid? You got to play this show.
Sure, Mr. Barry Gordy.
That's great.
Oh, all right. So I guess we're kind of like at the tail end. Do you guys have any thoughts, anything to like wrap this up on?
Boobies,
good. We did just watch Aerosmith, so that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I just, like I said before, I think the radio is behind. I think it's outdated. I believe it to be the newspaper of the audio world. And I feel
minus respectable journalists.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like I blame the corporations involved.
Fair enough. I too blame the corporations.
Damn you, the corporations!
Damn the man.
Just shake your fist at
in your volcano lair.
Right. The world of excess and trivialities that I'll never be a part of.
Oh, and let me throw in one final gripe about the radio.
Please do.
Yeah, do it.
Here and there, if I'm in a store or something, and I couldn't even name a store that plays the FM over the overhead speakers because they all have their own Muzak programs or whatever, subscription type stuff. But when you do get to hear the songs you're familiar with on a radio station these days, pay attention because I think they're sped up a little bit.
Really?
You can like if you're like singing along, tapping along, or whatever. If you're really familiar with the song, you can tell that it's a little bit quicker than how you remember it to be, and it wouldn't be surprising if that's true because I guess it's more time for commercials, or they get to claim that they play a couple of more songs per day than they used to, or than they're whatever the strategy might be there. But I think that's actually happened. I've noticed this in the last few years on FM radio. You're not hearing it exactly the way
the
that
X-Files theme.
We'll have to, when we get the soundboard up and running, we'll have to include that on our
That's a great one.
conspiracy theory watch.
Make a note of that.
I mean, I can't say that I personally noticed that, but that
I believe
does
it.
not surprise me at
Right.
all. That you can claim just like, yeah, it's, cut 10 seconds out of this song so we can play a Lowe's commercial.
Sexy Lowe's commercial.
A sexy Lowe's commercial. Oh my god.
That's some plumber's crack I want to see.
So I guess the moral of the story is just like rock and roll itself, radio's dead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly not living.
Man, you guys ended this shit on a sad note. What the fuck?
Boobies.
Yay!
All right. right. So I guess that's sort of the wrapping this up. If you want to, you can follow me on Twitter at Gorilla Karate and on Instagram at Occasional Nudity.
I will let you know right now there is no occasional nudity. There's never nudity. It's usually drinks and a cat.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna sell it. If anybody's looking for nudity, it's not gonna happen.
There are so many better Instagram accounts you can follow for nudity.
It's true.
Yeah.
Not mine though. But you can follow me on Instagram. I am DasBartige81. That is DAS_BARTIGE 81. You can follow the show on Twitter. It is Stereo on the Radio, like at Stereo.
At Stereo on the Radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At us. Don't forget to follow Shady Voices Media also on Instagram. That's always a good one for show pics. A little bit behind the scenes kind of action if you want to see our ugly faces, and if you want to see pictures of us
actually naked.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're there. Sweeney, anything you want to plug?
You can find me at Shady McGrady's bar.
Shady McGrady's.
Shady McGrady's. We do not record there, but we are there almost every day.
That's very true. They love us there.
Yeah.
I think especially you guys more so than me. You guys are probably keeping the doors open at that place.
There's around 7 people that pay for the entire upkeep of that establishment.
Which isn't much, but it's definitely paying the rent.
Yeah.
If there is one anymore, they have to like own that building outright by now.
I mean, it's basically just another bill that I pay. It's just like, all right, rent's in the mail, paid the electric. Also, got to go to Shady's and give them another $40.
Are you one of the select few that collect your mail there?
Actually, my paycheck gets direct deposited into Shady's, and they just give me cash out of the register for groceries.
Gotta run across the street. I gotta get gummy bears for the week.
I'm so surprised that there's not like a Shady's brand beer or like a Shady's brand cigarettes.
It's just mop water.
Yeah, exactly. Just ring it out right into a bottle.
Yeah.
It's twist-ons.
They took all the filters in the ashtrays and ground them down into new cigarettes.
They brew it right in the old popcorn machine.
Oh.
We're all gonna die real soon.
Well, I could use a drink.
That's right.
All right, we're off to Shady's, guys. Thank you for listening. We'll be back later.
Bye.
Ciao.